When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band. He said, son, when you grow up, would you be the savior of the broken, the beaten and the damned? He said, will you defeat them, your demons and all the non-believers, the plans that they have made? Because one day I'll leave you a phantom to lead you in the summer to join the Black Parade.
Welcome back to the Cork Football Podcast. With the full spectrum of the good and the bad of Cork football on Saturday. As I said in my debut podcast there, I said Cork football, they're not an easy follow, even when they're winning. And that certainly was true of our win over Kildare. I suppose just before I do any review, I just noticed that the media coverage of Cork is... it's very superficial, and it's actually when you're looking at it in such detail and you're listening to what the so-called experts are saying, like against Derry, we were dead and buried, and what was after happening to Cork. And I suppose if you had anyone that had actually seen the game would have said that wasn't the case. And the same then on Saturday, it was Cork are flying again, whereas to be honest with you, my satisfaction levels after both games, there wasn't much between them. And only for Louth beating Derry on Saturday, I'd have been fairly downhearted coming out of Parky Ring, even though we won. I think just that Louth win is after papering over a lot of cracks. But, I suppose, look, we'll start off there with... just looking at the panel that we put out there on Saturday, and I commented there on Twitter that it was the strongest panel that we've put out in, I would think, since 2015, and definitely our first 15 was very strong. There's a lot of potential in the bench, alright, but I think there is a bit of a discrepancy between our strength of our first 15 and what we have on the bench, and that's something we'll have to look at. Just to the game itself, anyway. I suppose, look, it was the coming back to the cliche. It was a game of two halves, but fairness in attack. The first half, you couldn't complain too much. We showed a lot of patience and accuracy with some nice movement, and we got 122. Great scoring with 8 2-pointers. But it was one of those days when anything we kicked went over the bar. I think we had 8 out of 10 2-pointers. And I suppose as an attacking strategy, I don't think it's something you can hang your hat on. Definitely not in the business end of the championship when you probably won't have strong wins. I don't think it's something that we can be kind of saying that, we're fine. But Kildare, I thought, were very naive. They gave us too much room, and that was plain to see. And, as the half progressed and we were well in control and the match seemed to be won, I was actually hoping that Kildare would push out a bit on us and make us work that bit harder for our scores, because we never hit our full forward line like we did up in Louth now. And if you actually look at it in the cold light today, the 16-point lead we had, it came from the 8 2-point shots. And like, if just from a conventional attacking point of view, say in the old game, like before the 2-pointer, we actually only got 1-6 from working our inside forwards, which probably won't do, considering that the wind we had and the dominance we had. But look, I suppose on the positive side, we've a great range of shooters now, natural shooters like you Stephen Sherlock, Chris Oak, Mark Cronin, Sean McDonald, Dara Sheedy, Colm O'Callaghan, Luke Fahey and Brian O'Driscoll. They're all fairly good shooters. Some of them are excellent, but most of them are very capable shooters. And I don't think I've ever seen a Cork set up like that now with 8 reliable kickers that I named, and throw Brian Hurley into that mixed in as well. Look, I thought Sherlock was actually excellent there on Saturday. Just even outside of his shooting, he beat his man on the turn there a few times, and he showed a great turn of pace there, coming in through on the end line once or twice, fisted a great point. And that pace, he just didn't have that before. And on this form, like he's a guaranteed starter, which hasn't always suited him. But I'm of the opinion, I think the penny is after dropping for him. I think he's after realising that the intensity of intercounty football, like you can't be dipping in and out and be waiting for balls to be put in the plate for you, and that he's worked great off the ball in defence there on the last day. It was excellent, and you have to keep the energy up all the time, and it's kind of you can't expect to go full throttle when you're on the ball if you're not work rate isn't up to scratch off the ball. It's kind of a feedback loop, and he's definitely after cracking that code anyway, and he's looking very good at the moment. So that's a great positive for Cork, as long as we can keep him fit. Chris Ogue also, I think he was super. In fairness, note him, he scored 1-9, 2 pointers, 1-9 from play. And the thing I really liked about him was that he just took responsibility, especially there in the second half. He came out and he started running from deep at Kildare and beating defenders and he kept us ticking over. Now, he had a few goal chances that he doesn't seem to be converting. Fair enough, he got his goal, but there was 1 or 2 others that he didn't convert. And look, that's something we're not converting our goal chances. It's not, and it's going to come back and bite us. But look, I suppose the other forwards there, Mark Cronin, Dara Sheedy, Sean McDonald, they all did fine. I think Sean McDonald, he'll have to tidy up in his shooting a bit, but look, he did work very hard, very strong on the ball, very composed on the ball. He actually created a great goal chance there for himself out of nothing there in the first half. He was just the way he was able to control the ball in possession, and the shot went across the goal. But look, I suppose, and another positive I thought from the forwards is that, there was a few occasions that, passes didn't go exactly to hand. And there were times before we'd have kind of given up on them balls. We'd have, nearly blamed the man that was passing the ball to us. But we didn't. We kept fighting. And there was one particular occasion, I'd say there was 3 or 4 poor passes in a row. But we kept fighting. We recovered the situation and we got our score. So that's a great positive. That's just a sign of a team that's working for each other, But look, I suppose that's from the forward point of view. Look, we saw what happened. Just in the overall, we can't hang our hat on getting 2 pointers. It just won't work. So look, what I would say is, and another thing, I don't think we're just not using the long ball enough. But I'm going to come back to that again. And look, defensively, it's not good enough, and we're going to get taken to the cleaners in Killarney if this is our level. I said it after the Meath game, like the last ditch defending. It's a great spectacle, but a bit like the 2-point shots, they'll come a day when they just you won't get the breaks, and you're in big trouble then. And I don't actually think it's a personnel issue. I think it just comes down to our setup. And our first line of defence is just engaging the opposition way too deep inside our own half, and it just stands to reason. Like if you were engaging the opposition in an area where the free you might give away is very scoreable, like your aggression in contact has to be much more disciplined. And whereas if you're engaging 10 or 15 yards further out from goal, you can kind of roll the dice a bit more with your aggression in the tackle. And I mentioned there after the Derry game that there would be two possible kind of solutions to our defensive setup, and Maurice Brosnan actually highlighted that there after the Armagh Dublin game. He put up a shot of the way the Armagh defence was setting up, and they had 3 defenders. They were kind of ready to engage the Dublin attackers on about 50-55 metres out from goal, and to counteract in against the space they were leaving behind them. One of their defenders was after kind of cheating over onto the edge of the D and leaving a Dublin forward free out in the wing on the inside, and the Armagh keeper was kind of keeping an eye on him. But what we're doing is we're inviting the attackers onto the kind of the edge of the 2-point arc, and like there's a huge incentive then for a forward to take on his man in that situation, because look, the way he'll play the percentages, and he'll say he'll either be his man and he has a shot for 25 yards, or else he's going to get fouled, and it's a fairly handy free, and that's happening to us continuously. And look, if you look at the thing that Maurice Brosnan highlighted, like say if the Dublin attacker does beat his man 50 yards out, he still has an awful lot of work to do, and if you do give away the free 50 yards out, like it's definitely better than giving a free 30 yards out. So it's a kind of a calculated risk, and I suppose to combine with engaging further out your forwards, and have to put on a much more pressure to kind of stall the attack out around the midfield area. And if you look at Kildare on Saturday, they were doing that to us, especially in the second half. They were engaging our when we were coming up the field, they were engaged us very strongly out around the midfield area, and it was slowing us down and giving them a chance to get into position. But look, we're at nothing until we start this out. Look, it's grand, I suppose. The only thing about our setup, I would see the positive side of it, and it's that it does really counteract against the long ball, the early long ball. But and I suppose with an eye to Kerry, who like to use that kind of a tactic, the early long ball, we are reasonably well set up for that. But I think we'll have to be able to kind of vary it. There's very few teams will play the long ball like Kerry. So it just has to be horses for courses. But we have to get that kind of a set up into our armoury. But look, in fairness, our inside defending then was excellent, very disciplined. In the second half there, like the only thing, sorry, not in the second half, even in the first half, like there was a few times like that we were in very close quarters. We didn't give away the free, and we had some great turnovers inside in our full back line. But look, you're living on the edge there again. But look, it's no harm that the lads can do it. But look, defensively within the second half, we were completely at sea. And look, it just came down to me. It was everybody seemed to be leaving it to the next man, and look, and we were kind of waiting for the final whistle from about 15 to 20 minutes out, and only for Micheál Martin, it's actually unthinkable what might have happened had we not got the breaks. But that's it on the defence anyway. On the kick-outs, look, it's tricky enough to find out, to see what's going on, but I thought it was very similar to the Derry game. And it's obvious enough, it's that when we're being pressed hard, we struggle. And while we have variation in our kickouts, I don't think we're using the right option in the correct circumstances. And as I said after the Derry game, and it was kind of confirmed for me on Saturday, that the blame doesn't lie with the keepers. I think it's actually a lack of leadership out the field, and that there's a lack of someone calling the shots. And I'd specifically identify here, like Colm O'Callaghan and Ian Maguire, that when we're pressed high on our own kick out, we just basically have to ignore the short option, and we just have to go along on the overload and get the numbers in for the breaks. Because I think what's happening is that we have to realise like that, and it seems to be said a lot recently as well, that the kickouts are kind of becoming a lottery, especially long kickouts, and we're not even buying the tickets for the lottery. It's we're going long, but we're too spread out when we go along, and we don't have the players around then either for the breaking ball. So we'll just have to make up our mind that our jumper can't be isolated, and the rest of our kind of midfielders and breaking ball fellas that should be winning breaking ball maybe 30 and 40 yards away from them. We have to, if we're going long, we have to overload, and that'll give us a bit of breathing space. Your opposition then are going to have to start matching your overload, and that'll open up the option then for the short kick out. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, and I think the psychology of the kick out as well is that why are we giving the opposition that psychological lift of hitting a short kick out where there's very high percentage chance of a turnover. If you lose a kick out on the overload well out in the midfield on a breaking ball, number one, you have the bodies there to slow down the attack, and it's not as much of a psychological kind of a drain when compared to losing a short kick out. Look, and I suppose just on our goalkeepers, it's going to be a very tough call of who they're going to select. Just looking at it Saturday, I don't think Patrick Doyle was fully fit, because I just noticed ever before there was anything happened in the second half. I just noticed in the first half when we had a very strong wind, but he wasn't getting great distance into the kick-outs, and I don't think that leg injury is fully recovered. And you could see, I noticed that there was a lot of backspin on the ball when he was taking the kick-outs, and that means he's getting under the ball rather than putting his foot through it. He was putting his foot through the ball in previous games, and he was getting great distance. So that, and just for the few kind of calamities we had calamity is a bit strong, but like Micheál Martin above and Derry, I'd give Doyle a pass on the kick-outs going astray on Saturday, and I just refer back to what I was saying about our kick-out strategy. I think that we need more leadership out the field, especially on their high press. And but look, and under another thing about Doyle actually was that there was a few high balls went in the first half, and I thought he was very solid under them. He did misjudge one, all right, but that one it came. There was kind of a block down, and the ball spun. The ball was spinning, coming towards him, and it hit the ground. And Gardner man wasn't going to judge where that ball was going to go. And I think Micheál Martin did very well. Definitely, he's a very good stop shotter, or shot stopper. But he look. But in my own opinion, I don't know. I'd nearly stick with Doyle if he is fit. I think at this stage, I think we should stick to our guns. I think they went with him Saturday on the premise that he is their number one, and I think we should stick with him. And I think get things sort out things further out the field, and I think it would make it easier on our kicker, on our keeper. But another thing I wasn't overly gone on the kickouts was Tommy Welch seemed to find himself under the kick-outs inside in our half-forward line on the opposition kick-out a few times in the first half. And, look, it's what was happening. And they won possession a few times. And what was Sean McDonald then was funneling back in, covering the centre-back position. Now, I understand that you must deploy the bodies if you're doing this press, high press, but I'm just not overly gone on seeing your centre back so far out of position. Look, I don't know. That's kind of, I'm kind of being maybe a bit picky on that. But another thing that did concern me was the speed of transition. It has really stalled compared to the first couple of games there, especially when we get a turnover. We're not even considering the option of the long ball to our forwards. There was an instant there on Saturday. We had 3 forwards deep inside the ahead, and they were completely free. We had the wind, and the crowd could see it. The crowd had to start roaring And we decided, but it was too late to get the long ball in, and the chance had kind of melted away. And by the time we kicked it turned into a high risk one, and it didn't come off. And that basically stemmed from the fact that we didn't even consider looking up when we got position. And I think this is completely down to the sideline, and it's just not on our radar. I think every player's natural instinct, most players' natural instinct is to hit the player that's in free space. But we seem to be just happy to with this slow march up the field, and we go up and go through our forward set plays. But, it's grand to say that. And look, it has brought us to the brink of promotion, but long term, you have to, if you're creating that sort of space and those free men inside, you have to be hitting them. And if we don't, it's just we're going to hit a kind of a hard stop, and our progress is going to be limited. And look, I try not to be hard on fellas either, but I think Ian Maguire and Paul Welch, they're too pedestrian in transition. There's no urgency about him. I think, I know Sean Welch there, he came on, but that's the one thing he really does offer. I think when we're in transition, there's fierce urgency about him and drive. I think we need more of that. And that just comes back to the use of our bench. I think it is becoming an issue. I think we're using our subs in a manner that looks like we're working off some sort of a rota than who's right for the particular circumstances that's in front of us. And I think Saturday we should have used the bench much earlier. I think we have to kind of realise that the last 20 minutes of games now, like, the space will open up, and defenders are tiring, and you'll have a lot more one-on-one scenarios to exploit. And we're introducing players that are kind of solid, more than fellas that can actually beat a man and make incisive runs and stretch defences. And I just a comparison there between Rory Dean and Darragh Cashman there. Both of them came on Saturday, and it was night and day. Look, as I come back to, you can't fault Rory Dean. He's very solid, but you look at the runs Darragh Cashman was making. He was constantly running into the space where he could be dangerous, and Dean isn't doing that. Dean will always err on the kind of the path of safety, and it just entered my head. I said, they seem to be dead set on giving Rory Dean game time. And look, that's the management prerogative. But I think if they're going to give him game time, I'd prefer to see him in the first half than actually in the second half. Because look, we've had 3 games there now that we were well on top at half time, like Louth, Offaly and Kildare, and our bench hasn't given any impetus in any of them 3 games. And all we're doing is attempting to see out a game, and it hasn't gone well for us on any of those 3 occasions. And I think it's because of it's our bench isn't offering us enough. And look, we are at our best when we're driving on rather than hanging on. And look, we look good when we're taking risks and being positive, like the first half above against Louth and against Offaly. You could say most of the Meath game, we were going hard at it throughout that game, and even I would say that the first half against Derry, we were at our best in those instances. And I think that it just come back to what I said at the start. There is a disparity opening up between our first 15 and our subs, and I think we need to blend our resources better and not have it so lopsided. We have to use our full panel more strategically, because I think there's too much of a drop off when we're using our bench. So look, I suppose I just don't want to be coming across as negative, considering what's the league campaign in total, but like, there are serious issues that need to be addressed. And look, we have had a great league campaign, all said and done. We've 5 wins out of 6, I think. And outside of that, the Cork public, we have them back on board. There's a bit of a buzz and an interest again around the footballers. Look, we go up to Tyrone, we give it our best shot. I wouldn't say it's the end of the world if we don't get promoted. In fact, I just have this nagging suspicion in my head that we're not tactically ready for the step up. But look, I could be wrong there. Maybe I'm being a bit of a doom merchant there. But look, coming back to what I said the last time, I'd be looking at and Saturday's game now was the first in I said it was first in 3 games in the run into Kerry and Killarney, and it's possibly now it could be 4 games, and I think we have that game put behind us now, and whatever happens above in Tyrone, it happens. If we get to a league final, grand, we'll see how that goes, but I think Kerry still needs to be our focus and the top of our agenda. So look, there isn't a lot more to say, but I'll leave it there, and thanks for listening.